Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's having a great start to the PMM Summit. I was chatting with people during roundtables earlier, and I feel like we have a ton of people who are visiting from out of town. So if you are not to Denver, native to Denver, welcome. This is not always how nice it is in April. So you got some windy but really nice weather. And it's great to have you guys here. We had a product marketing meetup group that was the PMA Denver chapter that was really active before COVID hit. And it's wild to me how many people we have in the room today who are Denver-based and have the PMM title because it was such a small community before COVID hit. Can you guys hear me okay? But yeah, it's great to be here. For today's session, I'm going to be talking about the PMM Juggling Act and how a goal-setting framework helped PMM become a leader at our hypergrowth company. But quick intro to me. My name's Kristen Ditch. I started in PMM officially in title in 2018. And at first, I was at a company called Choozle, which is actually just down the road. They're an advertising technology company. I joined as employee 7 and started in CSM, and that was really where I learned a ton of what Mindy was talking about earlier today around just having so much empathy for the customer and learning your customer inside and out and how to speak to them. And that's where I moved into the product marketing space. Then I went over to a company called Conga in the digital documents Salesforce ecosystem, really to learn about how product marketing worked at scale across additional channels and a big product suite. And then most recently and currently, I am the head of product marketing for the embedded platform team at Workato. But on a personal note, you can find me up the road in Boulder with my dog or riding my bicycle. And if you want to talk about either of those things, I'm happy to show you pictures of the dog later. My boss would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to explain a little bit about Workato before we dig into it. And I think it is helpful to understand a little bit about the company to understand the challenges that I'm going to talk about. So Workato is a leader in the enterprise automation category. This is kind of an emerging category as integration services and robotic process automation are starting to blend together. And we have a software that helps companies integrate their technology stack. What that means is maybe you connect your systems between the different technologies that you have in a specific department, connecting your department's technologies to another department, or actually writing automations that connect the workflows that happen between those two departments using those different technology data points as the driving force. We have a low-code interface that allows you to connect those systems and also create those automations. We work with teams across companies. So you can imagine it's kind of that Swiss Army knife kind of tool where you're going to be talking to a lot of different personas and a lot of complication in the sales cycle. But we're going to be working with companies that have marketing teams that need their technology stacks integrated, HR teams who need their technology stacks integrated, and then they need HR and marketing to talk to. And then, like I said, I service the embedded platform team at Workato. In the roundtables earlier, we were talking about how is your product marketing team organized. And ours are actually oriented around business unit, which does play a little bit into persona. So if you want to talk about that later, feel free to find me. But our embedded platform team helps companies take our technology and actually incorporate it into their own products so that they can solve customer integrations. Also happy to chat if you have an OEM sales motion that you support. I feel like there are very few of us in product marketing who have that. And I'll get into some of the challenges of that in a minute. But I'm working really closely with the sales team in that business unit to help our customers take this to market and ultimately sell this as a new product or a feature within their company. So as I'm sure you can imagine with all of this, the juggling act got very scary very quickly. So when I joined Workato and I was interviewing, I was brought on to become the first product marketer. And I was always brought on to service a specific business unit, this OEM sales motion that I mentioned. But I was the first product marketer at Workato. The closest job function that we had before I got there was kind of like an outbound product management team who their sole responsibility was writing a lot of technical content about specific features and functions. And when I interviewed with Workato, it became pretty obvious that they were going to need people to come on board that had a clear vision for what product marketing could be, but really leaning towards that sales and marketing vision of product marketing. Everywhere else I had been before had been very product-centric, really aligned to roadmaps and product launches. And so when I was interviewing with people, I would ask them, what do you think product marketing needs to do to service this company better? And this was the crazy list that I ended up compiling. Over the course of interviews, 11 interviews with people, I got this amazing list of feedback from people of what they thought product marketing could do to support the company and improve the revenue targets that we were tasked with hitting. But as you can see, this list was largely comprised of tactics, a lot of collateral requests. And so I put together this 30, 60, 120-day plan. If hopefully someone is laughing in the room because this is super ambitious. And I really kind of attribute like listening to the customer, in this case, the stakeholders that I'd be working with, is a large part of why I got the job. And I came on board and I started getting to work. But I think I did myself and product marketing a disservice in the long run because people thought of us as the team who made stuff look good. And so we ended up spending a lot of time triaging, writing collateral, and it was a lot of reactive tasks. So fast forward 6 months, I was no longer the Lone Ranger at the company. We had brought someone else on, and we started talking about what do we want product marketing to be here, and how is this different than the reality that we're sitting in today? For some context, the company had gone in that 6-month window from 275 employees to 400, and we had just gotten our new sales targets for the upcoming fiscal year, and after a year at 8 figures, where we already had hit a 300% year-over-year growth in sales, new accounts, and revenue, we were gonna be facing another 300% growth year. I'm just gonna let that sink in. Already at 8 figures. And so we had these indications that the company really was gonna start hitting this steep hypergrowth. We had it from hiring goals, we had it from team expansions, and then the revenue targets, of course. And we had built this vision that product marketing was a team that people wanted to work with, which was great. That's a great starting place to have. We were super collaborative, super cross-functional, but we wanted to make sure that we took that unique vantage point that we had of what was going on at the company across all of these different views, and then really make sure that we were becoming a strategic partner that was helping craft the vision of what was gonna happen in that stage of hypergrowth. So introducing OKRs. Raise your hand, are people familiar with OKRs a little bit? Okay, some. If you're not familiar with OKRs, this is a framework that was established by Andy Grove over at Intel, but really made famous by John Doerr over at Google just before the new millennium. The framework's pretty straightforward, as you can tell. You've got your objectives and then your key results. Objectives just being what do you want to accomplish, making sure it's specific, and then key results, making sure that they're measurable and time specific. A lot of companies go on ahead and they set OKRs for a year. Other places that I've worked do end up breaking it down into quarters so that it's just more digestible. But for OKRs, even though no one else at Workato was doing OKRs, it became a way for us to take a moment, focus, and really be intentional about the work we wanted to do in a quarter instead of having that be driven for us by someone else. And then the other piece of this was that it helped us set boundaries. Product marketing, as anyone who has been trying to staff for since COVID hit, has been a really hard role to staff for. Recs used to have 200 applicants and may now get 50. And so then that means just adding to your team once the recs get approved takes a lot longer to find the right candidate. We needed to make sure we were setting bounds in a way that was gonna make sure we were using the resources that we had effectively. So how it comes together for us. The first, we make sure that we're really clear on the company goals and the metrics of the company. A large part of this is that, to some of the conversations that were just happening in the last panel, if we have a common goal that we understand about the company, that's gonna allow us to really have common ground with other teams that we might be working with to make sure that people understand the business impact that's mutual to us and how it manifests in an OKR for us. The second step is that our team lead, which at Workato is the VP of Product Marketing, goes on ahead and drafts the annual goals for the team. He usually distributes those to the team leads, myself included, and we end up having a couple days to kind of review them before we have a team call, where we have about an hour-long conversation, digging in, dissecting them, adding viewpoints around what about this may or may not be measurable, what about this maybe doesn't align, where are there gaps that we have. I can't overemphasize how helpful those calls have been. We have really refined and refocused OKRs, including just like throwing out whole objectives based on the course of that conversation, because we have people who are oriented to different personas and have different sales motions. We have people who have program-based PMM functions now, and having that conversation affords all of those different perspectives that we have about what's working cross-functionally, where do we have data gaps to really be bubbled up, and then that becomes a conversation. And as a leader on the team, then we're understanding the barriers we're gonna have to break for the team members below us. The third part, and something that we've been kind of refining and I have a really strong opinion on, is making sure that we really only have one objective per cross-functional team that we support. The first quarter that we did this, to the conversation that was just happening of like 5 or some odd number of goals, it got to a point that it was really hard to understand at the end of the day, what does product marketing at Workato care about? And so I look at my OKRs now and I draft them. I have one that ties back to sales, one that ties back to marketing, and one that ties back to product. It's super clear from a cross-functional perspective, but then it also means that as we are thinking about prioritization, as we're thinking about cross-functional collaboration, that it's super clear to the people that it's going to involve. And then we have kind of a prioritization within how we're working cross-functionally with those teams, what matters, and what's the measurement we're really going to be focused on. There we go. And then that's kind of a good segue too. With one objective tied to each cross-functional team, it makes the socialization of this a little bit easier too. I'll talk a little bit more about socialization in a second, but the next stage in our process is socialization with key stakeholders and executives in particular. To the Q&A at the end of that last session, this socialization early is so helpful in being able to hold on the bounds of what your scope is. And I use this time and again of like, hey, great idea, great idea. But we have kind of already established what our objectives are for the quarter. Let's go on ahead and talk about using that to next quarter. Of course, if something happens where the company goal changes or the metric the company is concerned with changes, that's a totally different conversation. But otherwise, it allows us to kind of create a defensible position for the team. And then last, we get to work. So some tips for socializing the OKRs, because like I said, this is a pretty big thing about how I think it's helped change how product marketing at Workato was so reactive to very proactive and really thought of as a leader at the company. We use this as an opportunity to set expectations with the stakeholders of what does this process of socialization and feedback look like. For my business unit, I have about 10 team leads that I work with that I socialize this with. And that's CS, business development, sales, expansion sales, et cetera. And I try to be really clear in setting expectations of how long they can give me feedback for, how I want them to give me feedback. I want it to be in a call. I want it to be over Slack. I've just found straight up Google slide commentary to be really helpful. And then how I want them to focus their feedback. I found early on that I would just leave it open-ended and then I would get every idea someone had in the whole wide world. And sometimes I don't want to have a conversation about that. I really want your feedback on the tactics that might be associated with this, or how does this fit within the objectives you have for your team. So making sure you're setting expectations on all 3 of these fronts is really, really key. The next is that socialization. Where are you socializing it? And it's not only those lateral team leads that I mentioned before, which have since expanded to other parts of marketing or other parts of product as Workato has grown. But then I'm also socializing it up too. So making sure that I'm having a conversation with my CMO, with my VP of PMM, and then with the same counterparts on the product side I need those people to be bought in so that if I come to them with a barrier that I need help getting blocked and tackled, that they can help me and that they're already bought into that priority as well. And then the last thing is presenting with confidence. Like I said, we were talking in the roundtable about PMM orientation, and my team and my role is oriented by a specific business unit. I am constantly trying to think about things from the perspective of what's best for my customer and what's best for this entire business unit of 95 people to be successful. And when that's the way that I approach all of my work, and I have all of the data that's available to me to kind of inform the prioritization I'm doing, I have so much confidence going into those conversations that what I've put here is what I think I can do and my team can do that's gonna offer the most to the company and the company being successful. And so make sure you own that. Make sure you're really confident about that because that customer first mindset can really, really change things. A couple other people I was talking with earlier when I mentioned I was gonna talk about OKRs, they were like, oh, we started that. And that's how it had been at every other company that I had been at. Like I said, no one else was using this framework when we started. It's not like HR was facilitating a process. It really had to be self-imposed for us to be successful with this. And so trying to think through what we did that made it easier to keep up with this as an opportunity to have that focus and that intention in how product marketing was serving the company. We make sure that we take the time to do quarterly OKRs. We're on a shifted fiscal year, so we're actually really early on in the fiscal year. There is nothing more painful than going through end of year, doing your new year planning, writing your annual OKRs, and then being like, and now I have to write the Q1 OKRs. But taking that extra time really helps make these things digestible, making it more actionable and broken down. Making sure we keep them visible. The first couple of quarters, this was something that I don't think we were great at. And so it would be that like, oh, that mid-quarter checkpoint kind of conversation of how are we progressing towards those things we really wanted to make sure we're doing the right work, not just the reactive work. And so making a move to having those Google Slides open as one of those 3 tabs I always have open, making sure that as we've moved our team into Asana, that that's available and accessible to anyone who has access to our Asana, so that if they have questions about where things are on the board, they can see our team goals to make sure that they are totally in line with that too. Using monthly check-ins during one-on-ones has been huge, just to have those conversations, especially as our team size has grown, and I'll get into that in a second. We're using OKRs as a way for people to have more autonomy and be more like agile and rapid in the work that they're doing. But the last thing you want is for someone to feel like, I put it on my OKRs, and then here we are, I have like an issue, and I don't know when to address it, I don't know how to address it with my manager. So using monthly one-on-ones to, well, in our weekly one-on-ones, once a month, talk about OKRs has been really helpful. And then something else that we started doing that I think works at Workato and helps facilitate some good conversation because the company has such a strong growth mindset is post-quarter scoring. It's nothing crazy. There's no rubric or Excel spreadsheet involved. We use the very, well-baked method of red, yellow, green. But post-quarter scoring is a great way for us to assess what is unfinished and then have a conversation about why is it unfinished. Like I said, we're at a hyper-growth company. We're about to hit 1,000 employees, and things are changing really quickly. And so what made sense at the beginning of the year or even at the beginning of the quarter may not be relevant anymore. And so let's have an honest conversation so that we can be communicative with the cross-functional teams that impacts about how things are changing and why we're evolving. Otherwise, does it get moved to next quarter because there was merely just a bandwidth issue? And then we go on ahead and move it to the top of the list for the next quarter. I'm mindful that lunch is coming up, so try and be quick. Why this has worked well for our hypergrowth team, I think a lot of people that I've talked with today have gone through similar crazy growth spurts for whatever stage you're at. And so why it's worked well for us. We are a huge team now to me. As the first PMM hire, we have a team of 10 and we're actively hiring. And so OKRs are a way, especially as we have more business units that we're supporting and these programmatic PMM roles, OKRs are a way for us to have transparency across all of these teams, and then also make sure that we're having good conversations with people when there's dependencies involved on an OKR being accomplished. And then it's also really allowed us to keep an open conversation about that intentionality as our market's evolving, competitive factors are changing and stuff like that. It's kind of a forcing conversation every quarter of what's evolving and the big things that we need to keep an eye on as things are changing. I'll also add that we've been so successful with it that the whole company is now moving to OKRs, so that's pretty exciting. Next, and I did go on ahead and include, now we actually have the sophistication of having a departmental OKR structure and then down to the individual teams too. And then next, I like to joke that I am like a cat with 9 lives at Workato. And some of that is because I think when the best product marketers that I know, I think are people who look at the business health, and then what do they need to do to make sure that they're helping grow the size of the pipeline, accelerate how the pipeline flows. And that might change quarter to quarter, year over year. So I've had quarters where my OKRs have been very oriented to pre-sales. I've had quarters where OKRs are very oriented to post-sales. Sometimes it's oriented to pipeline, sometimes it's oriented to content. And I like to look at the whole health of my business unit when I'm writing these things. And so if I'm counting my lives correctly, I think I'm on 4. So I'm hoping that I have more than 9 at Workato, because in 18 months being at life 4 doesn't sound great. But it's been really exciting to have something like this, because when I go into those stakeholder conversations, instead of us having to obsess about what information, or excuse me, the framework that something is being presented in, my stakeholders, my VP of sales, my head of solutions consulting, my product management team, everyone knows what kind of information they're going to get when we have that conversation. Everyone understands the framework of how it's being presented. It means that we're going to have a more substantive conversation about what the actual goals are. So it's been super flexible as we have continued to evolve as a company, growing from a business unit of 20 to almost 100. And then it's kind of my sanity check. There's always resource constraints and hypergrowth. This is a model that helps force us to have proactive conversations about the work we should be doing instead of the work that someone who's the most vocal person in the room asks us to do. And it allows us to have proactive conversations if we're not going to be able to solve for something. And then that's super important to me and my own personal work-life balance as my team continues to grow, making sure we're trying our best to facilitate that for others. This helps us have a real conversation about resource constraints. So a few things that we've learned. The first is iterations to the framework are nice and can have huge impacts. So what we ended up doing is we added a second column for key activities. For stakeholder socialization, getting it to a tactical level helped them understand what some of it was a little bit better. So just kind of articulating some of those and making that modification has really helped. A couple other things. Scheduling repeating calendar holds seems silly, but has made a big difference for us in just having that accountability of the planning, especially when you think about how it may or may not align, depending on how good you are at planning, may or may not align with other major initiatives. Having dedicated time that's already blocked from like a scheduling perspective is helpful, both for the planning and for review. Data can be hard. We had so many systems. Like, I can't even believe how big our own technology stack is. So finding a way to make sure we're having open conversations with people early about what we want to measure, so that we can try to make those improvements around the measurement piece. I mentioned before the single objective per stakeholder, and I've also tried to get to a point of what is our primary result that we want to drive for each objective too. So push comes to shove, if we're trying to make a prioritization decision, what is the KPI that we want to move the needle on, and then kind of go from that perspective. Socializing at a high level with the field has also been really helpful. So now how we have it, when we go into QBR with our sales team, they're doing retros on how their sales quarter went. And at the end of the day, I'm giving them the OKR framework at a high level of what product marketing is doing for you in the next quarter. Keep it really high level, try and tie it back to them, but that's been something that's been really positively received. We talked a little bit about referencing conversations already, and then what you decline, consider for the next quarter, a little bit to that yes and from the last session. And then I love thinking of these as themes. I mentioned pre-sales, post-sales, content, pipeline, helping people understand that thematic focus of product marketing if you have a really wide-ranging role is awesome. And then last but not least, what's next for us? We are to a size now there's just so many ideas, and people are sitting in so many meetings with our customers that they have great ideas. And so we're opening it, this is new for us, opening it to the field that they can make requests and submit requests. So we have Asana forms set up now that they can submit things, and product marketing takes those into account, and then that's gonna help us build some of our tactical focus in the future and find themes for our OKRs. The next one is individual contributor level OKRs. We're starting that in the second half of the year, so that, like I said, from an autonomy perspective and letting people feel empowered to just run with it, that OKR framework will give us the confidence that we're at least aligned on what that looks like day to day. And then the last part is continuing to improve the measurement of things. A large part of this is because we're tied to revenue and because we're in a hyper-growth business unit, I want to make sure that we're measuring the impact of what we're doing at a tactical level and with our OKRs in a better way to show impact to the company and then speed. As an OEM sales motion, a lot of the things that we're doing are in service to our customers. And so how does that accelerate an expansion sale, or how does that accelerate the total contract value for an individual account? So with that, questions, and then find me on LinkedIn if you want to connect.
Thank you, Kristen. All right, I saw 2 questions come in, so let's see. The one time I don't bring my tablet up here, there they are. Do you use OKRs and KPIs, and do they serve different purposes?
Yeah, so I think of KPIs as the key result piece of the OKRs. That's the measurement piece. So KPIs are a part of it. There are other frameworks, OKRs, VMT is another one that I've heard quite a bit about, and then Salesforce has their own model as well. So there's a few variations of OKRs, but all of them do have a measurement component.
Great, thank you. So then outside of what you've shared, what's one piece of advice you'd give to all the emerging PMs out there to establish their brand internally? You said you had a great reputation as a product marketing team. I know a lot of us struggle with just explaining what product marketing is.
Yeah, so one of the things that I shared during Roundtable is I think having our teams be tied back to specific business units has inherently helped, because I'm tied to a specific sales team, solutions consulting team, and persona, and so it's really easy for someone to know to come to me, and then for us to be able to have impact on something that's tangible for a business on the whole. And so I think that's been something that has been really helpful. But otherwise, one of the things that I struggled with earlier on in my product marketing career was being comfortable standing up and socializing the work that we're doing. I thought of product marketing as the team who made everyone else look good. And on the one hand, I want that. I want to enable my stakeholders and my subject matter experts when we're running enablement sessions to be engaged, be involved, show domain expertise, present as a peer, and get people engaged. But it's been, I think, game-changing in terms of how I'm thought of at the company and how product marketing is thought of at the company, and not being afraid, I should say, to present something that you're doing and help facilitate that conversation on stage so that people understand the work you're doing behind the scenes.
Awesome. Speaking of behind the scenes work, last question here is, what enablement tools do you use?
Yeah, so we have, our tech stack includes Clue. We're about a year into using Clue, and I'm pretty happy with how we've grown as a team in using that tool. And I would definitely +1 all of the consistency stuff that was mentioned at the end of the last session in terms of deployment of that kind of, those resources, so that people are accustomed to expecting it, knowing where to find it. And then otherwise, we have HighSpot. I can talk your ear off about HighSpot. I've loved working with them. And those are the primary things. We do everything we can to try and centralize everything in HighSpot so that our sales team has one place to go to. And then we're a very Slack-oriented company.
Yeah, great. Well, one more snuck in there. Which industry leaders inspire you in product marketing?
Oh, I've been blown away by the diversity in all of the PMA podcasts. So there have been fantastic presenters. There have been some recent ones from like Adobe. Clue has actually had some really interesting podcasts. So I don't know that I would name drop a specific person, although I'm a big April Dunford fan. So definitely recommend all her stuff.
All right, thank you so much, Kristen. We are going to break for lunch, which will be served just outside.